Hi, everybody. This is Joy Divergence, and today I'm here to talk to you um, about the third step of getting out of the matrix. And the more one that I've been focusing on recently has been a part of learning, and and I've been learning this for a while, but it's been more or less an area of refocus recently of awareness. And learning what that actually looks like. So there is, tell us, I would think, a lot of the time. And in this particular case, I'm looking at sharing a story with you. This is a story that, so that others could understand it. I had to write it out first, though, for others to understand fully what that looked like, what that meant. And at this time, it's a series that I'm writing that's called Joy's Gold Nuggets of Life for Life. And this is the first mini book that I kind of did with that, surrounding energy work, and it's energy work is an ability and a tool. And the reason I chose this subject was because even though I had written several little other books before this, I realized along my journey that there were still a lot of people out there that would perceive energy work as bad and wrong. But what I found what I found was that it was because they had um, they had gotten to a point of being taught this so frequently that they tend to forget exactly what really was. Once you took out the emotions and the beliefs, the truth would then be revealed. You had to learn how to change that within yourself. You had to be this book. This book is, as I told you before, it's called Energy Work is an Ability and a Tool. Energy work is an ability and tool. However, over time, it has been shoved aside and treated like lower than dirt in some places throughout time. Do you understand it? Some may and some may not, but have been taught to either love it and or fear it. But then usually the individual feels that they are afraid to speak up simply because someone else decided to put an emotional charge along with a disbelief that has caused mankind to be corrupt throughout history. But what if you remove the emotional charge and the disbelief? Then you ask yourself, if you reached an absolute authenticity of your own, what most don't realize is that someone did tell them certain information along the way, whether that was through their actions or their voice of how they spoke about things, or even how they looked at each other. There was like a hidden, unspoken language and message when somebody would respond and react with a different approach because of what they had been taught in the past. Truth, where a feeling of goodness is connected to your answer. So perhaps even allow yourself to look at the word history. When you separate it from the feelings and emotions and resolve those feelings and emotions, how do you feel about history after you've done that? It becomes information. At that point in time, you get to discern for yourself what was the real truth of what happened. You don't need a book to discern that for yourself. But perhaps a spiritual leader who is who is unconditional with all of mankind. If you don't know a spiritual leader who is unconditional with all of mankind, then perhaps it is time to become that person. We all need healing and our thoughts, feelings, emotions to be resolved within in order to come to a higher awareness and understanding. But most refuse to do so. Are you an individual who decides to rise above the heavy energy and feel like a weight has been lifted? But perhaps you are wondering if you can lift off the heavy pressure in the world by resolving the heavy pressure within yourself. By doing so, you resolve the energy, and the pressure is then lifted off once again. But this time, you put into your backpack the things that will support you in flying at the speed of light, instead of stones and rocks that no longer serve you. Do you feel the weight of the world lifting off of your shoulders yet? If not, perhaps you need an easier path and someone who has taken the time to learn how to do the in-depth work. So they learn how to support individuals like yourself, even more so. So that you find the help you need in order to find a way home. In order to find a way to arrive at your different destinations that you know are out there, but starts by you finding where you need to be in order to receive that information that serves and honors you in the best ways, in the best of ways. That supports you in finding the real deal, the arrival of authenticity, of goodness, is already within you. But if you don't know how to find the buried treasures within in a way that serves you and mankind as a whole, then perhaps it is time to reach out for the support you need at the right time, in the right place, and finally get what you have been longing for: relief, along with having the weight lifted off your back, so that you no longer are being the burden to yourself that you have been. Most don't realize when this is happening. Most don't realize when this is happening, but apologies, I'm misplaced my spot. then perhaps it is time to reach out for the support you need at the right time, in the right place, and finally get what you have been longing for. Relief along the way, along with having the weight lifted off your back, so that you no longer are being the burden to yourself that you have been. Most don't realize when this is happening because it's gradual, but you are definitely more than worth it. But depending on how long you have been carrying the weight depends on how long you have been stuck. But when, or what if, but what if there was a magical box that you could use to resolve it all over time in the way that serves you? But you do it one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, by starting to do the next right thing. Then you begin to find more answers. The weight is lifted even more. You feel relief once again, and even a little more than the previous time. Then what? You get to get up one day and you start moving forward. This is the story of self-growth. But if no one has never shown you this before, how are you going to know it exists? How are you going to know it exists? Isn't time, isn't it time you got a magical box of support that helps you to resolve your issues over time? This is known as the revealed, released, resolved box process. Imagine yourself holding an item. Let's say you are having a challenging experience with that item at this exact moment. The frustration you get builds into anger, but instead of releasing the frustration before, it gets to the next level of frustration that has built up over time. You then begin to feel anger. Then the anger is suppressed. It doesn't go anywhere. But by accident, you made a decision that didn't really serve you at this time. But then this happens again and again and again. Until one day, your backpack of emotions have suppressed so much that you begin to feel rage. But because you have already gotten used to stuffing down your frustration, your anger, you begin to do the same with rage until you become this old crotchety person who wants nothing to do with the world. But now, let's say someone came along and did it in reverse. Then you would get to also know what it's like to no longer be the crotchety person. But most people deal with an interesting emotion that is attached to a feeling of greed and want to hold on to it and even feel the need to defend it with their very lives. Until one day, you are the old person who is being placed into a care facility. You finally celebrate because you finally get what you need. I once knew an elderly couple that dreamed of living in a care facility where others cleaned up their mess. But what I realized after my own journey of having both ways, the reason they dreamed of this was because they never had it to begin with. They had some tiny amounts of support, but never got the full package deal. Instead, They were given only tiny amounts at a time, but that was all they were capable of receiving as well. The wife even dreamed of how she wanted people to remember her, but to me, it didn't seem like much, but to her, it was everything. The reason I felt like wasn't much to begin with, though, was I realized one more person was preparing to go to the grave because her life force had been taken from her in little increments over time, that whatever original dream she had to begin with was no longer possible in her mind. She gave up on her long-term dream. But more than likely, this happened when she was a child. I began to feel sad for her, but I realized many had this happen to them. But she was also celebrating death. To most, that was the oddest of things to see. But what I realized even later was more than likely she had been waiting for this to happen most of her life. As usual, my heart saddened. But later I learned there were more life lessons for me to learn. So I continued on my journey. But as I did, I found even something more shocking than that. I was able to recognize what dome of life they had chosen before they entered this life, along with learning that we could choose what life we really wanted. I chose the Transcendence Dome, but when I did, it meant I would leave the other dome and each dome of reality that I found, including the individuals that I met along the way. I began to find more and more answers. What was once truth remained truth, but also transformed into new information, which was the end point of the prisoner dome. But then when my life transformed, I transcended the first prisoner dome. I did this many times as a young child, but later I found the words to describe more and more of this information. I learned how to obtain the answers to transcending, but without dying in the ways that most perceive death. I found transcendence was possible in this life and technically in any life. It just appears differently to each person. Where one person dies, their story continues somewhere else once they leave the life they are in. So are you ready to allow yourself to enter the Transcendence Dome? Is what I would ask people at this time, so that you too know what it's like to have true freedom. However, it's usually new for people to identify as energy work as an ability that is a tool that healers have automatically. But healers are also warriors that have been pushed to the edge and back far too many times, to the point to where they were exhausted and they needed something to change. When it became a need, everything seemed to change. People didn't realize that all along it was already a need. It just got to the point to where it was a must. As other individuals are awakening into a new dawn where healers are being more recognized for their beauty and goodness, along with another mini book series that I will be coming out with that supports individuals in self-awareness and general awareness, while also supporting them in resolving some of what has been causing stress that has been more than necessary for them throughout their entire lives. You need to build your mind, your body, your spirit, and your heart muscles in order to attain this. When you feel ready, let me know, and we shall begin the journey together. I am also working on a mini book series of testimonials that I will be releasing on New Year's Day. But as I share this with you, this story, I want you to think about for a moment what it was exactly that was working for you before and what wasn't. And where you find where it wasn't working, allow that to be released. Because as you do this, you'll begin to find other answers. You'll begin to find how to fulfill your needs. You'll end up being and feeling fulfilled. This is just a piece of getting out of the matrix, the prisoner's matrix, where we end up being the victim. But then we wait for someone to rescue us from the villain, or at least perceived villain. The hardest thing for me to do when I first started this journey was to acknowledge those that I, at some point in time, believed what everybody else was saying, that they were the villain. But then one day, I realized something else. My older brother and I, we had a moment where everything was torn apart, where everybody else decided for us that the victim, that there was a victim and that there was a villain, and that they were the rescuer. And instead of actually working to resolve the issue, in a way that would have allowed my brother and I to stay together, instead, both my brother and I lost each other that day. He was taken from the home. While in the meantime, I began a life journey of healing on a much larger scale than what I could have ever done before. But it hurt, and there was a lot of confusion, and I didn't understand why they did what they did. But I also realized that what they did was needed, but it didn't need to last. That was what they didn't know. It only lasts as long as you are willing to be the victim of what happened once before. It's one thing to separate the victim from the villain temporarily, but then later, as they both heal, you find that the villain was a victim once too. And once they heal, you find that there is far more answers of a journey, a path that you can find when you awaken your awareness and find that you are more powerful than what they ever did to you. You survived. You are here. Do not let anyone take your personal power away ever again. Even those that are being heroes play a part in accidentally taking your personal power away sometimes. Not all the time, but there are moments. And it is up to you to discern and learn from those mistakes, and learn from what your mistakes are sometimes too. And go, okay, that didn't work. Let me look for another way. Let me see if there's another way. Because what works for you will work for somebody else. It is vital that you remember this if you are to survive, let alone step out of surviving, step out of the prisoner's drama triangle. It is possible, but it is entirely up to you. One day, for those of you that have found this video, you will find there is another way. You just need to be looking for it, and you will find it. But do it with honor. Do it with integrity. And make sure that you do everything you can to love yourself along the way, even when you are making mistakes, even when you lose your temper, even when you get lost in all that drags you down. Know that it is sometimes, in those moments especially, that the villain is no longer in existence right there with you, except within yourself. So if you let go of it and forgive the individuals so that you can feel better, so that you can release what no longer serves you. Know that you are loved. I'm sending you all lots of big bear airheads. Namaste.